So up next we have Mike Monello and Steve Coulson. Mike is the Chief Creative Officer at Campfire, and the work at Campfire has been awarded top honors at the One Show, Clio Awards, Mixx, and AdTech and Addy Awards. Before Mike founded Campfire, he was the co-creator of the Blair Witch Project. You guys have probably heard of that film before, right? Yeah, okay. And it changed the way marketers approach the internet. Steve Coulson is the creative director at Campfire and guides creative development for comprehensive transmedia and social experiences for the agency. His 14 years of experience in new media marketing includes work for Sony Entertainment, HBO, Discovery Channel, Harley-Davidson, American Eagle, Coca-Cola. Mike and Steve will speak to us about their experiences honing the art of persuasion in the filmmaking and agency world. So please welcome Mike and Steve.
Back in 1998-99, I was fortunate enough to be part of the team that made the Blair Witch Project, and it was an incredible experience. But the idea behind the film was really very, very simple. The idea was to tell a horror film, to make a horror film using the vernacular of cinema verite, home movies, and documentaries. And in order to accomplish that, we gave ourselves three kind of principles to follow, right? So the first was very simple and very obviously, everything must feel real. Now, this principle actually guided not just kind of the story, but the production, right? So instead of shooting the movie like a regular production with regular shoot days, it was shot in 8 days in the woods in Maryland. The production was inspired by Special Forces Army training. So it was 24/7, real time. The cast had minimal contact with the crew, although there was contact. They did not know what was going to happen. Their food and sleep were rationed and reduced over time. They were given their story directions separately and told to keep them quiet. So none of them really had any understanding of what was going on or even what the other characters' motivations were going to be. This whole make it feel real aesthetic, sorry, I shouldn't have had that wrong. This also came down to the tech that we used for the film. We wanted the film to look like it was shot on high-8 home video, so we shot it with a high-8 home video camera. Now, if those of you who work in the movie industry will know what a ridiculous idea that is, because most cinematographers will shoot on the highest resolution camera available and then dirty it up in post. But that looks like shit. It never looks like a real high-8 camera. So we went to Best Buy, we bought a high-8 camera, shot the film, and then returned it. So someone's home movies have been shot on the camera that filmed the Blair Witch Project. The mythology that was created around the film and that was put on the web before the film came out was also patterned to follow the kind of witch mythologies that have existed. So everything was done to look real, right? The second principle we laid out was that everything must have a reason to exist. Now, in good drama, everything has a motivation, but in Blair Witch, literally everything had to have a reason to exist, including the way the movie opens with a title card explaining why this film exists. And that last line in particular, a year later, their footage was found, is probably responsible for the genre that we know of as found footage. I apologize for that. But the film wasn't the only thing that needed a motivation, right? When we put out a companion book to the film, and instead of it being behind the scenes, it was actually positioned as an investigation into the case. If you remember the film, it has no music, but we put out a soundtrack CD. Right? The soundtrack CD was the mixtape that was found in the car, that was found in the manhunt when the students were found missing. So everything had a motivation to exist, and if we couldn't find a reason for it to exist in the world of the film, then we didn't make it, or we tried our best to stop the studio from making it. And mostly we succeeded on that. The third principle actually is related to the story, and it is we would not confirm or deny the use of supernatural in the film. So the idea was that whatever argument you wanted to take after you saw the movie would support it. And so you take a look at the stickmen. On the one hand, yes, those stickmen could be supernatural totems, or they could just be locals having fun out in the woods. And this was actually really, really important not to confirm or deny one way or the other, and it caused a lot of problems with the studio. who wanted us to clearly have a supernatural moment in the film. And they asked us to reshoot the ending, which we did. And whenever we tried to cut that ending with the supernatural moment, the film just kind of fell apart. It just wasn't designed to kind of definitively say one way or another. But following these principles, what's interesting about it is that it helped us make a world around the film that was larger than the story of 3 missing filmmakers. And the result of that was incredible, because these are, if you want to know what the web looked like in 1998, Blair Witch fan sites. These fan sites, most of these were launched before the movie came out. And what happened was the world was so detailed that people wanted to play in that world. So when they created fan sites, they didn't really create fan sites that were kind of about the movie. I love this movie. They more like gave themselves roles, like I'm a historian and I run camping trips through historical spaces where the Blair Witch mythology happened. Or I'm running an investigation into the Blair Witch myself. So it's pretty incredible the way that people wanted to play in the world. And it led to a principle that we use at Campfire all the time, which is think like a forger, but don't be a con artist, right? And what we mean by that is that it's all about the details, right? You get the details right, and the world becomes something that people want to play in. Whereas con artist becomes about fooling people, all right? So what does that look like? What does that look like in the context of an ad? Cinemax asked us to promote a new series called Hunted. And we created these ads. It's called out-of-home ads, right? And they're from a high-end personal security firm that's at the heart of the TV show, Byzantium Security. We place these ads where a firm like this would look for clients, Wall Street, all through the financial district. And we had a provocative line that was inspired by the time that these ads would go up in Wall Street, which was on the 1-year anniversary of Occupy Wall Street. And we knew that so we're not for everyone, just the 1% that matters, right? And I don't know if you saw this photo, but it actually traveled quite a bit. Some photographer, we could never, this looks like we took it and we lined it up and those are actors. This is actually a real photo that a photographer took that was covering the event, and it kind of became the defining image for the 1-year anniversary of Occupy Wall Street, which is pretty incredible. It spread quite far and also played into the story that we were telling. And so with ads like this, they pass what we call the sniff test. I'm going to pass it over to Steve, who's going to talk a little bit about the sniff test.
Thank you. The nose was my segue. So we sit around the creative teams at Campfire, and we often use this metaphor when we come up with an idea or a campaign or an object we're going to create, whether it be a video or a poster or something more physical. Does it pass the sniff test? Does it smell real? Because when you think like a forger, you know that your work is going to be looked at with both an intellectual eye and an emotional eye. All right, what the head says about something and what the gut and the heart says about something as well is really important, because authenticity is not, and I hate to say this, it's not just about empirical evidence. It's not just about provenance. It's also about whether it feels real. And there's something quite indefinable about that. But we realize that oftentimes it comes down to sense memory, which is this phrase. When you pick up an object, I've got an object, here we go. So, when you have an object that you come across that looks like an old box, you start to say, well, tell me the provenance, where did it come from, but also does it feel like an old box? And because I have a sense memory from having touched those old boxes before, or having smelt them before in antique shops, I use that sense memory to guide me on whether or not this object is real. And because of that, a lot of our work at Campfire is based on digital and social and events, but also it's very rooted in physical objects. We realized that one of the best ways to immerse somebody in a story world was start to create some physical objects from that world that really pass the sniff test. So here are a few of the things that we've created. I want to just show you a couple. Discovery Channel came to us one year for Shark Week. And our theme for Shark Week that year was called Frenzied Waters. It was based on the terror of a shark attack and what happens to the victims after a shark kind of rips them to shreds in the water. And we created these glass capsules that look like they've been floating in the sea for years and years, with a rusted patina on the top that was carefully applied to the screw top. And when you unscrewed it, there was kind of that crunching sound, and opened it up and we put scents inside. The smell of the ocean immediately came out of this bottle. And then you would pull the evidence of this one poor unfortunate shark victim and read their story through, looking through the evidence and constructing the story yourself from the evidence that had been left behind. Here's another box we created for the Nick. I don't know if anybody's seen the Nick and Cinemax. It's about a 19th century hospital. Boxes were created that had typed letters from antique typewriter. We had a variety of quack cures. We had a clamp with bloody lint, just a slight touch of a remnant of an operation there. And this scrub soap, it was carbolic soap. It was, as soon as you opened the box, there was this smell of a hospital that came out. And if you unwrapped the soap and used it, it was blood soap. So your hands started to bleed as if you were a surgeon. And finally, I mean, I brought one along, but I've got pictures here. This was a box we created for the first year of Game of Thrones, when nobody had heard of Game of Thrones, didn't really understand what it was about. It was a fantasy world. And we realized that, you know, the sensory experiences that you have from a trip to a foreign land often transport you back to the place. So this is a series of scents that were created specifically to mimic certain places within the world of Game of Thrones. I don't know if you watch it. There's the smell of the crypt, the smell of the god's wood, and the smell of the pepper from the kitchen. And there's a scent experiment here that you can put those three scents together and take a deep breath of that, and that would be what it would smell like if you stood in the courtyard of the castle at Winterfell. So a lot of attention to detail, authenticity goes into these boxes. When we create them, we will make a few hundred of those, and they'll go out to tastemakers, they will go out to celebrities, sometimes YouTube stars, journalists, people with a large community around them. They will come unheralded, they will open this box or this container, and immediately, because of the attention to detail, they will be transported into the world. I think, as Mike said, we don't tend to forge objects to fool people. We do it because we remove a barrier of immersion. Because if you hold something that feels real, you have permission to dive into that world. It's something which, and I know we have a magician here tonight. I used to work as a magician, and there's a certain strata of magic that's based heavily around storytelling. And I remember all my friends that were into that endlessly searched junk shops for old keys and dolls' houses and music boxes, because having some authenticity around the props is not meant to fool you per se, but it draws you into the world and gives you permission to believe that. And so what we find when people have these boxes, they immediately move from being consumers into being participants and storytellers themselves. And I think at Campfire, one of the things we really believe is that we are not storytellers, we are story givers. We create the props and allow people to tell the stories and play in the world exactly as they did with the Blair Witch Project. And often it starts from one key piece of evidence that's a very well-crafted forgery.
So, speaking of one key piece of evidence that's a well-crafted forgery, this is not something we made, but this is something that I discovered when David Bowie passed it along on his Facebook page. And it is a rare album. If any of you could ever find it, I'd love to get a copy. Milky Edwards and the Chamberlains remake of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And I think this video is a perfect example of a great forgery, because it's not just the song with the title, it's the record, it's the needle hitting the vinyl, and then this classic Stax Soul version of the song is fantastic. Thank you.
Didn't know what time it was, the lights were low. I lean back on my radio. Some cat was laying down some rock and roll. Lots on the sand.